Hello again, this is Ed from Wise Up. We've been asked quite a lot recently about cryptocurrencies, what they are they any good, are they worthwhile looking to invest in? So we thought it'd make sense to actually put a little presentation together about cryptocurrencies altogether. Now, if you think about what's happened with cash in the last, let's say, 40 years, we've gone from predominantly notes and coin, then we've gone through the sort of chip and pin debit card type of thing, onto contactless payments and Apple Pay and things like that. So, cryptocurrencies, I suppose, are just an extension of that cycle that's moved us away from physical notes and coins into virtual money. But how does cryptocurrencies actually differ from the money that's either in our pockets or in our bank accounts? So let's have a little look at what this is all about. Now, my first question to you is, do you believe in ghosts? Now, it might seem a bit of an odd question to ask, but if you do, and maybe there's 50% of you guys out there that do believe in ghosts, why do you believe in ghosts? Is it because that you've seen one? That's a possibility, I suppose, but probably unlikely. Perhaps only 10% of you may claim to have seen a ghost. Perhaps you've heard one, things that go bump in the night or something like that. That equally is another possibility and probably more likely than to have seen one. Perhaps you've been into a room and it's suddenly gone very cold and you think, oh, there's definitely some sort of something unusual going on around here. But probably most of you would have heard some sort of stories that back up your belief that ghosts are either in existence or they're not in existence. Whatever it is, that's your choice. But there's nothing tangible, or very little tangible, that we can grasp onto generally that actually backs up the idea that ghosts are in existence. It comes down to belief. Now, if we ask the same question about Bitcoin, for example, do you believe in Bitcoin? Well, nobody would have seen it because as a coin, it doesn't actually exist. Nobody would have heard it because it's obviously completely silent. You wouldn't have felt it either. So this one is very much down to stories and news. And I think if we went around the class now, there would be 100% of you that did believe in Bitcoin. Why? Because we know that there's a market in it. So it all comes down to belief. We all believe Bitcoin is there. It's got a value. We'll talk a little bit more about that value in a moment. But when we actually strip it down to its bare basics, there's no more tangible evidence for Bitcoin to be worthwhile than there is to believe in ghosts. They both really exist because of the stories that go on around it. They may well be physical reasons that we believe in it, but the chances are we haven't seen, heard, or felt any Bitcoin. We only really know about it because of what we read in the press. So let's look about values on this sort of stuff. So why has money that we have in our pocket got a value? If we think about why is a £5 note worth £5, why is a £1 coin worth £1? If we think about what the intrinsic value is, so that's the value that the actual physical item has got. A £5 note is nowhere near worth £5. It's probably worth less than 1p because all it is a piece of plastic with some very fancy things on there that stop people forging it. So how is it then that this £5 note, which is actually worth less than 1p, is exchanged for £5 in goods wherever we go around the country? Well, there's a huge history behind all of the reasons that notes are worth what they are. If we sort of went back a long way, coins in those days would have been made out of precious metals. So the precious metal would have been worth roughly what the coin denomination was. So if we had a £1 coin back in the day, we didn't, but if let's say we did, and it was made out of a precious metal, it might be made out of gold or silver to the value of that £1. So it had an intrinsic value roughly the same of what the coin denomination was. Now the problem was, as we became more and more wealthy as a state, there wasn't enough gold or silver or precious metals to carry on minting coins. So we needed something to make a replacement. Now you think about it, if you had a pocket full of gold coins which had an intrinsic value of the same as the value of the denomination of the coins that were printed, then if somebody asked you to give all that up for one piece of plastic with £5 written on it, would you be keen on doing it? Well, probably not. Which is why a huge amount of time and effort was made by central banks and governments in effect to make people believe that the £5 note in their pocket was worth £5. So there's an enormous amount of central bank regulation. We went through a stage whereby you could actually physically exchange your paper money for its value in gold. That was called the gold standard, and that didn't actually end until midway through the 1960s. So there's a huge amount of effort gone into it. And what's happened over that period of time, all of that history, all of that regulation, is that we all trust that that money is worth the denomination that it's printed on. It means that you can go into a supermarket with a £10 note and you can exchange it to goods to the value of that £10 as well. We can give it to each other, we can give it into banks, and we will always be paid out for the same value as the paper money. So an enormous amount of trust which has taken a long time to build up. So let's spin that round now on its head and let's think about the value of Bitcoin. Now, why has Bitcoin got a value? Now, there might be some trust going on because you can actually use Bitcoin to buy some things. I know Teslas at some point were being bought by, or could be bought by Bitcoin. There are some very high-end watches that you can buy with Bitcoin, but you certainly can't go down to the local supermarket and exchange your Bitcoin for goods, food or anything like that. You can't put Bitcoin into a bank. It has to be stored elsewhere. So whilst there might be a little bit of trust, for the vast majority of people, they will not be using Bitcoin to buy anything. They will only be using Bitcoin as a tool to try and make more money. Now, the whole reason that Bitcoin was made in the first place was to actually get away from central bank regulation so that people had much more control over their own money and central banks were not able to regulate Bitcoin down to where it wanted to be. That was one of the pluses as it was sold at the time. Now, there's no history to Bitcoin. It's only been around since 2009. So in actual fact, very little reason for Bitcoin to have any value when we sort of compare it with the history and the regulation that gave notes and coins, currency, its value. But if I told you that the value of Bitcoin today was just around £40,000 per coin, you might be a bit surprised. So what has it actually done to warrant having a value that's so high? Well, the reason is that it's purely supply and demand. There are very few Bitcoins around, relatively speaking, and there are a lot of people that want to buy Bitcoins, so the price is driven up. But because there is no regulation, because Bitcoins are not used to buy things, because Bitcoins are not used for governments and central banks around the world to use with each other to pay for goods and services, it means that the Bitcoin themselves are very, very volatile. That means their price can move around an awful lot. And it's the lack of regulation that actually goes towards that. So that's the value of Bitcoin. Currently at about 40,000. It's been up to 60,000. It's been down when it started, obviously, at zero. But recently it's been down to about 23,000 as well, all within the last year. So you'll get an idea about that volatility. And I'm going to show you a slide about that in a minute. So before we go any further, let's have a little look at what cryptocurrencies are. Now, I've already said they are not physical coins. They are digital files that are made and held on computers. And they are created using something called cryptography. Now, cryptography is really a study of secure communications techniques. Things like WhatsApp were devised and run through cryptography, because when you have a conversation with somebody on WhatsApp, your conversation is encrypted at one end and it is de-encrypted by that person at the other end. Those two encryption codes are specific to the two users, so it means nobody else can look in on your conversation. And Bitcoin is created in much the same way, so it's a very complex method of actually generating these files. Now, whether we like or whether we don't like Bitcoin, the actual technology that's going behind this is really, really important, because what will happen is that eventually general banking will pick up on this whole idea of cryptography, and we're already going a long way towards that, because our online banking will become much more secure if we use a similar type of cryptography that are used to generate Bitcoin for our general banking needs. Now, anybody can create cryptocurrency, and believe it or not, there are more than 8,000 different cryptocurrencies out there already. Everyone would have heard of Bitcoin, I'm sure, but there's others out there that are probably perhaps not quite as well known, but still reasonably well known. But the vast majority are unknown, and the vast majority are worthless. But the one thing that we can say about all of these cryptocurrencies is they are not regulated by any central banks at all. They are completely unregulated markets. Now, if we think about our cash, we'll go back to our normal currency again. Anybody that holds the £5 note or the £10 note has the value of that £5 note or £10 note. If we think about cryptocurrencies being a digital file, how can we prove that we own that digital file? Because it's not in our possession, it's somewhere else. Well, the way it's run is on something called a public ledger. So if two people enter into a transaction using Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, there is a public ledger with that transaction on it, and it is something called blockchain. That is the name for the public ledger. Now, when I say it's a public ledger, it doesn't mean that we can just go in and have a quick look to see who owns 5 Bitcoin. It's much more complex than that. It is something that's encrypted again, but it can be used to find out exactly who owns what. And it's this blockchain that's going to be really useful in general banking going forward. And our cryptocurrencies, I've already said, are not owned by us, or they may be owned, but they're certainly not held by us. They are held in wallets, in electronic wallets. And these wallets are the things that people can access themselves. So everyone will have their own wallet, and within that wallet will sit your cryptocurrencies. And these wallets are very, very important, because it's extremely important that the wallets are secure and you can access the wallets freely. This is where some of the problems that come in, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. So going forward, how are cryptocurrencies created? Well, there are two different types. Some are created by mining and some are created by proof of stake. Now, let me explain what I mean by both of those. Now, mining is just a huge complex calculation that's done by computers. At the end of the calculation, so when the correct calculation is done, whoever has made that calculation is rewarded with a Bitcoin. That is one mined Bitcoin. Now, although anybody can mine Bitcoin, it is a hugely complex calculation. It's not something you could do on your laptops or your phones. You need supercomputers for it. You need enormous amounts of power. In fact, to generate one Bitcoin, you'll need 150,000 kilowatt hours. Now, to put that in normal terms, that amount of power would drive a normal electric car around 600,000 miles. So just to get one Bitcoin. So it's certainly not green because it's using masses of electricity. Now, depending on where you can actually get your electricity from, how much that's going to cost, that will vary the cost of generating a Bitcoin. If we did that in the UK, it would cost around £21,000 at the current cost of electricity to generate one Bitcoin. If we did it elsewhere and Many Bitcoin have been generated or mined out of China, where electricity is an awful lot cheaper. Then obviously the cost is going to come down. But certain governments are not keen on mining to be carried out within their countries. China at the moment are having a crackdown. They are not allowing people to mine Bitcoin out of China. So this whole thing is in a sort of a bit of a state of flux. So what's the other way that we can actually generate cryptocurrencies is by proof of stake. Now, there's no mining going on with proof of stake cryptocurrencies. They just exist. They are there in the ether, and there are a certain amount of cryptocurrencies that are validated periodically. So although there might be lots and lots of this a particular cryptocurrency out there, until it's validated, it has no value. So there is a control over the amount of blocks of cryptocurrencies that can be validated at any one time, and then it's pretty much down to the people that want to buy it. Now, that's great in as much as it doesn't use loads of electricity, it's not as expensive, but big stakeholders can actually buy up big chunks of certain cryptocurrencies, which gives them an awful lot of control. And that's one of the dangers of cryptocurrencies. And I want to go through these dangers because they really are very, very important to understand what the dangers are before we start getting involved. And it might well be by the time you understand these dangers, you don't want to get involved at all, a bit like myself. Now, a cryptocurrency has no intrinsic value. It is just a file sitting on a computer. So there is nothing to touch, nothing to feel, nothing to hold. It has no intrinsic value. I've already said it is not regulated, which makes the whole market extremely volatile. The price can move around all over the place, and there is no central banks there to try and calm everything down. Like we see if we had a run on normal currency, central banks would get together. They would make sure, because they had so much purchasing power, that they could actually control these markets. That's not the case with cryptocurrencies. Now, cryptocurrencies are also open to cyber attacks. They sit in cyberspace, so of course they are open to cyber attacks as well. Not so much through the mining, but it's the wallets that particularly can be broken into. So you may have companies or people coming along that are out to actually take some money off of other people by breaking into their cyber wallets and accessing their hard-won or hard-earned Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies as well. So we need to be very, very vigilant when it comes to the wallets that we're using. It's also open to something called pump and dump. Now, what is pump and dump? Well, pump and dumps can be explained. If you've got something that has very, very little value, you can buy loads and loads and loads of it. If you buy lots and lots, and let's say you buy the whole market share or the, let's say 80% of the market share of something that's very, very, very cheap, and you have then an awful lot of influence within an existing marketplace, you are able to talk up the value of the asset that you're holding, maybe artificially. Once that gains some traction, the price can start running away. So you can start pushing the price up artificially high. As soon as it gets to a certain level, you can dump out all your holdings. You make a profit, but everybody else in there makes a loss. So we need to be really, really careful that these smaller markets certainly are open to this pump and dump idea. They are not so well understood. Cryptocurrencies generally, if they were understood, there'd be no reason for me sitting here talking about it today. But we need to be really, really clear that if we do not understand something, we leave ourselves open hugely for misinformation, for being scammed. That's a potential that could go on. Lots and lots of things that we need to understand before we get involved. My advice is always the same, and it has been over all of my trading life. If you don't understand it, don't get involved in it. Make sure you understand things before you get involved. And finally, although there is no evidence that cryptocurrencies are any more accessible to money launderers than regular banking, this whole lack of regulation and means that new clients might not be as thoroughly checked out by potential exchanges, which means that money launderers may be attracted to those particular markets. So not easy to do for money laundering, but because there is very little regulation when it comes to know your client or know your customer, which is what goes on in the actual world, banks and institutions need to understand who their clients are, what they're actually doing with their cash flows, that backs up normal business. That doesn't go on in cryptocurrencies. So there is no need for potential money launderers to try and prove where their money is coming or going to. So it does leave themselves open a little bit more about it. But let's just take a minute or two to have a look at Bitcoin volatility. Now, I'm talking about Bitcoin particularly, but all cryptocurrencies potentially have huge volatility because, as I say, they're not regulated and they are relatively small. That's a chart for the last 1 year for Bitcoin. It has a current value of £38,359. That was as at, I think, about the 28th of December 2021. Now, if we look at one particular section of this graph, and that's from sort of early May to late May. In early May, it was sitting at around £42,000. That was on the 8th of May. But by the time we got to the 23rd of May, the value had almost halved down to £24,500. So that means that you would have potentially lost nearly half of your investment or your gamble when it came to buying Bitcoin if you'd have bought it at the wrong time. Obviously, there are potential upsides as well. We do get times when the price goes up a long way, and we can see if we get across to November there where I've got the cursor, we were at just under £50,000 at that point, and we're currently back down to less than 40,000. So very, very volatile. So with all of these things, I would really say, unless you understand it, the volatility can be an absolute killer. There is no point in even thinking about investing in cryptocurrencies. If you're going to get involved in cryptocurrencies, you're not investing, you are taking a gamble. And if you're going to gamble, like any gambling, you can only gamble what you can afford to lose. So whilst I've got no problem if people want to get involved in a very small way with cryptocurrencies and try and make some money out of it on that way, in exactly the same way that you might place a bet on something, if you're actually looking at this as part of your portfolio for your pension, please don't go down that route. It just doesn't make any sense at all. It's far too volatile. But if you still want to try, then let me try and go through some of the things that you need to be aware of before you get involved. Now, the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, which is our regulatory body here in the UK, which regulates every company that has anything to do with finance, they have banned, to all intents and purposes, UK-based exchanges from trading cryptocurrencies. Now, the biggest one in the world used to be an exchange called Binance. Now, Binance covered over 500 different cryptos. It was based here in the UK. But the FCA had a bit of a problem because they could not, in all sort of sincerity, regulate Binance when Binance themselves were trading in non-regulating currencies. So they refused to cover Binance, which means that the FCA were no longer regulating Binance, which means, to all intents and purposes, they stopped people being able to trade cryptocurrencies here in the UK with UK-based exchanges. Doesn't mean to say that people could not trade with exchanges that are based elsewhere in the world, and that is in fact what's going on. But if you still want to get involved, even though the FCA are telling you not to, then read on. If you do, You've got to research, research, and research again. Make sure that you understand absolutely everything about the risks of getting involved with cryptocurrencies. Don't just listen to this chat on here and watch a couple of videos. You need to do much more than that, because if you don't, you're really leaving yourself open to lots and lots of scams, lots and lots of risk, and potentially lots and lots of losses. Once you have researched everything and you feel very comfortable that you understand how these markets work, I would really recommend opening a dummy trading account. Something like the dummy trading account offered by eToro, which is actually a UK company. So this might sound a bit strange when I tell you the FCA back eToro. The reason the FCA back eToro is that eToro is a company that give you data. They do not actually become an exchange themselves. They point you to a different company to deal with. They will just give you the data to base your strategy on, which you will need to do and try and hone that strategy using dummy trading accounts. Try and use the money, even though it's only virtual money, try and use it as if it was your own, because knowing that it's there, it's very easy to become very blasé. It's not real money. They may give you £100,000 to play around with. Don't use it as £100,000. Use it maybe as £500 and try and make it as real as possible, so that if you lose, you can actually see or try and feel the pain of losing. If you're winning, then you'll be much more inclined to try and take your profit and come out of that as well. So try and use it as well as you can. And all of that time you're practicing, you're building up your skills, you're building up your knowledge and your experience, so that when you feel ready, and I really mean ready, then you might want to try with some real money. So once you've got all of that done and in place, only then start thinking about the market that you want to going to be involved in. Are you going to be involved in something like Bitcoin? Hugely expensive, so you probably won't be able to afford to buy one coin. So you might buy fractions of coins. You might want to go into some of the much cheaper cryptocurrencies, which means that you can buy actual whole coins. So if these things start to really rally, then you're going to make some good profits. But you need to make sure that you've got money that you can spend and be prepared to lose. So at no point should you ever think about funding your cryptocurrency journey with credit. It should only be done with savings that you are prepared to lose. Once you've decided what that's going to be, how you're going to do that funding, what exchange are you going to use? Now, Coinbase, which is the largest exchange, coin trading exchange, or cryptocurrency trading exchange, I should say, in the world, is based in the USA. They are a little bit more expensive, but you know that you're going to actually be dealing with a reputable company. So please do your homework. Don't necessarily go for the cheapest, because they may not be reputable. Then you've got to think about how you're going to store the cryptocurrency that you're going to buy, which means setting up and controlling your own wallet. Never use a wallet that you've not set up or you can't access yourself. If you have to do that through a third party, that's never good, because this is the weak link of the whole thing. You need to make sure that your wallet is secure. You can access it. When you need to get your money back out, you can get it out easily. Don't be fooled by lots and lots of people coming onto you offering really secure wallets. They will not be secure. Make your own choices on that. And then be prepared to lose all of your own money. So there is a possibility you could make good money, but if you aren't prepared to risk the money that you're putting in, do not trade. Now, just before I leave you, I really want to just reiterate something. There are lots and lots of calls going around at the moment. You may have even had one offering you guaranteed returns on cryptocurrency trading. Now, I've already said the FCA do not condone any cryptocurrency trading. So if you're getting these calls, they are scams. Absolutely no question about it. The scams can be really, really complex. They can say, right, give us a couple of £100. They will turn that couple of £100 into maybe 1,000 and give you that 1,000 back. They will then expect you to go back in again, and you will, because you've already seen your money go up by fivefold. You'll put more money in, and at that point that you will not get the next bit back. So be really careful. It's not just easy to see through. Just be really, really doubtful of any calls that you get coming in. If you want to do this, do it off of your own back. Get some advice from people that you trust. You're not going to be able to go to FCA registered people because the FCA will not condone it. But do your homework. Don't invest too much. I should say don't gamble too much because it's not an investment. And have a bit of fun with it, but only be prepared to put in the money that you are prepared to lose. And if you still want to have a go, I wish you all the luck in the world with it. I hope this has sort of put you in the right frame of mind. You now understand a lot of the risks involved with cryptocurrencies. And even if you're not trading now, you understand what they are. So until next time, stay well, and I'll speak to you all soon.